So instead of having to read 25 books on the subject, you can get it all right here. It is available from Progressive Press of California. Progressive Press of California. I urge you to go there. Otherwise, Amazon skims off a tremendous amount of the proceeds. And you can get an ebook version for as little as $6 through Progressive Press of California. So I urge people to take advantage of that. And I'm rather proud of the paper book. It may not fulfill everybody's criteria, but I find this rather handsome. Because here we have a suitably, what can we say, Frankensteinian portrait of the candidate. I call him the Kolob candidate. Kolob. And if you don't know what Kolob is, well, that's where the gods live, of course. And that's where your fate is decided in the doctrine of Smith. The Kolob candidate. News from Kolob. And, of course, the temple here, the main Mormon temple in Salt Lake City, the Mormon Mecca. Now, so that's that. I guess we're still setting up. I'm going to have to proceed anyway. Hope for the best.
Sorry.
As John mentioned, I was here in January of 2008 to talk about Obama. And I was here to try to show the dark side of Obama, which I think has come true, unfortunately, in the way that I said it would. But what I'm interested here is the method. When presidential candidates run for office, they lie. They lie.
No way.
So, or they don't even lie. They just they take evasive action. So what do you do? What's a voter to do? What's a citizen to do? And I suggested in the case of Obama, you look at the people around him, you look at his advisors, you look at his friends, Bernardine Dorn, Bill Ayers. My work there was helped by the fact that I had been a political enemy of Ayers and Dorn in SDS at Cornell University back in the late 1960s. You look above all at the guy's wife, Michelle. This tells much. And then you look at other factors. You look at the foundations that he worked for and things of this sort. Now, all I've done here really is to apply this to Romney. It's a little bit different though. With Obama, it was no positions on most issues, but hope and change. The cloud, the messianic utopian promise, right? Of course, now we're in the middle of the hangover, right? The Katzenjammer of hope and change, right? It's a bitter pill, and of course, that he should have known that. But that was it, hope and change. Now with Romney, there are numerous detailed positions, and they're always changing, right? This is the candidate of Etch-a-Sketch, of flip-flops, of mendacity, of evasion, Romnesia. Yeah, there is Romnesia, right? And the thing with Romney is, it's breathtaking. He's a skilled liar. I've never seen somebody able to lie at this rate. Anyway, the point here is, since he lies so much, what can we do? The one thing he keeps saying, the one thing that hasn't changed is, I love my faith, it's the faith of my fathers, I'd rather lose than give up my faith, and on and on. And we can look the people around him. Mike Levitt, transition team director, top Mormon. Spencer Zwick is the son of one of the Quorum of the 12, the ruling council, the apostles of Mormonism, top guy in the campaign. We look at Bain Capital. It's essentially a satellite of the Mormon or LDS Latter-day Saints church. So the problem now is with Romney, it's not just 50 or 60 years of Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers and some foundations. Now it's 185 years or so of Mormondom to see what the tradition is. How else would you do it? So that's what I had to do as well as I could. And this is now the result. So I'll give you the general finding, and I'll try to then to show you how this is relevant. The stuff about lying is simply that Mormonism is an antinomian faith. It believes that if you're a saint, and these are the last days, we're in the latter days, right? End of the world, end time, then you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you like. This is connected. You find something in Christianity, which Mormonism is not. You find something similar in the original Quakers of the 17th century, that if the inner light tells you to do something, then you have extra scriptural revelation. You can do whatever you want. In the Judaism, these false messiahs, Sabbatai Zevi in the 1660s, Jakob Franke later on in the mid-1700s, they say the same thing. They say, I'm the Messiah, do what you want. And here it is in Mormonism. So that's a word that I need to have, Antinomianism. And as we're going to see, Romney is closely linked to the Neocons. The regime that's now knocking on the door is a regime where the Neocons run the foreign policy. And that's, of course, John Bolton, that's, oh my God, the entire list. Dan Senior, Kagan, Dov Zakhem, bunch of them. They are Nietzscheans. They believe in the concept of the Nietzschean Superman for whom everything is allowed. And of course, they also are theoreticians of lying, as we saw. In the case of Romney, it's similar, that the Mormon saint is free to lie, is encouraged to lie, just like a neocon, just like a Nietzschean. And for him, everything is allowed, and his goal is to become a god. The end point of Mormonism is that you, the successful Mormon, male, if you're a successful Mormon male, you will take over a planet. Not this one. This one is taken. So your time here is like Romney as governor of Massachusetts. It's a stepping stone. But you're going to be headed for a planet where you will get a celestial harem that you had to accumulate while you were here. They had to be sealed to you. The women have got to be signed over to you with a special ceremony. That's your harem, and that's how you're going to rule. And woe to you if you don't have at least 3 wives, because then you're going to be a servant. You're going to be, as soon as you arrive in heaven, you're going to be castrated, and you're going to be a servant to the ones who got the wives in this world. So this is not such a good deal.
Does Romney have a wife?
Huh? This we don't know, but this is, I think, a very, very reasonable question, as I'll try to say. Now, the Romney campaign says, I'm super patriotic, I'm more American than the other guy. But wait, this religion, as I'll try to show, out of all the religions I've ever seen in the world, has the biggest story of anti-American hatred and a narrative of persecution by the United States. And it goes back to the fact that the Americans of the 1840s did not bow down and worship Joseph Smith, the founder, as the prophet or son of God, but a mob killed him. And this then led to what I think is the most shocking document that you can see in the middle of Mormonism, which is the Oath of Vengeance. And that is to say, until the late 1920s, until the time of Romney's father, George Romney, who would have been swearing this for the first 2 or 3 decades of his life, the Mormon liturgy, the temple endowment as they call it, right, the order of the day for divine services, contained a special part that said, I swear to exact vengeance against the United States of America and the American people because they killed Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith. And I promise to teach this to my posterity down to the 4th generation. I don't find that anywhere. You can find a Salafist, an Al-Qaedaist. I don't know if they have anything quite that specific that they have to repeat every time they go to church. Now, this was phased out, it's true, in the late 1920s, but still, if George Romney swore it and swore to teach it, then he had plenty of time to impart it to Mitt, to Tag, and Tag's generation, and to Tag's kids. Now, it's a very elementary question. Do you want to put somebody in the White House who comes from such a tradition? And I would have to say, no. You don't want to do that. I think that would be foolhardy in the extreme. Now, another one is, Romney says, I'm tough on terrorism. Obama's not tough on terrorism. Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. We'll talk about Benghazi. Well, if we look at the collected speeches of the presidents of the United States, the first time an American president says the word terrorism, well, it's 1857, and it's President James Buchanan talking about the Mormons. And he says, a strange system of terrorism has taken over Utah territory, and I'm sending the U.S. Army to bust it up, because it's a theocracy. Now, some people may be uncomfortable already, right? Because, attacking somebody for their religion. Well, no, not really. My argument is that this is a theocratic Freemasonry. It's Freemasonic, it couldn't be any more. It's like the P2 Lodge, right? Licho Jedli, Ortolani, these people. It's like the P2 Lodge, but it's also theocratic. So it aims at taking power, political power. This is what they do again and again and again. It's in the world of private armies, private political Gestapo. You'll learn, if you don't know them already, these terror-bearing names, the Danites. The Danites is the Mormon secret police. And the Shenpips, the killers, the exterminating angels of Mormonism. And they're still around. And they're now in the CIA and the FBI. Surprise. So, it's a theocratic Freemasonry. It's a political faction. Now, all of this is known more or less. I mean, anybody who wanted to know this could essentially read it out of the primary, secondary sources. But what I think I add to this, which is a discovery and it is unique, is that Mormonism is a satellite of British intelligence in the 19th century. And that the Mormon power that was constructed in the Intermountain West, between the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevada and all the rest, the Great Basin, the Intermountain West, this was designed to be a separate country. It was a separate country. It is the state of Deseret. Not the United States, nothing to do with the United States, and hostile to the United States, but allied with the British. And the reason people look at, they look at Joseph Smith and they say, this provincial mountebank, this transparent charlatan becomes the head of a religion that reaches around the world. How is it possible? It's not because of some magic power of Joseph Smith, I guarantee you. It's because of the backing of the London oligarchy. The people who ran the British Empire said, we need to create centers of military and political resistance against the United States in North America because we're going to have a civil war soon and we want to have a second front. We want to be able to cut the transcontinental railway or prevent it from being built, and which it hadn't been built then, but it would soon be finished. And above all, we want to cut the transatlantic telegraph, which was there, the transcontinental telegraph. Now, let's look at try to make this as relevant as we can today. I say there is a CIA and FBI Mormon mafia. That this is a powerful intelligence faction. Actually, as time goes on, I'm coming to identify them as at least part of the rogue network that I've written about in my 9/11 book, for example. The invisible government, parallel government, secret government, rogue network. Looks to me like the Mormon mafia is a key part of it because of their narrative of persecution. The idea being that they would like to inflict harm on the United States. You read the prophecies they have a fascination with the burning of New York, the burning of Philadelphia and Baltimore and Washington. That seems to be the area that interests them the most. They want all of that destroyed. And you don't find that in sources from the U.S. You find it in the British Admiralty during the Civil War, but you don't find it in U.S. sources. But, well, you know, think of things like 9/11. I keep that in the back of your head. Now, right now, one of the main things going on in the reactionary world is Benghazi, Libya. Now, I have an interpretation of this, which I'll just sketch for you briefly. Now, this is a guess, but again, I'm a good guesser. I'm a Yankee guesser. I mean, this is funny because this is one of the things that Brigham Young says. He's a Yankee guesser. He's not my kind of Yankee. But I guessed with Obama the postmodern coup. I guessed that Obama would be the bringer of color revolutions, and now we see the Arab Spring. Right? So the world there's been a wave of color revolutions around the world. Now here's what I say about this. This is an October surprise, Benghazi, okay? It's an October surprise in September. And it's to Carterize Obama. And it hasn't really taken off, but it's having some effect. And here's what it is. We won't even talk about the film, right? The film, right, that the Republicans say is of no importance, is of great importance, because the film is the packaging of this thing in the entire world. In other words, there was a demonstration in Egypt that got the whole thing going, in Pakistan, in 25 other countries, in Europe. What were they about? They were about the film. So the film is absolutely important. Who made the film? Well, the poor little jerk who's in jail is a patsy. He's a drug informant. We have a guy called Nasrallah, who leads us to the Islamophobia network, Pam Geller, if you know her. Well, who's the dominant figure in the Islamophobia network? These are the people who protested the mosque in Lower Manhattan. They also were the ones putting these incendiary statements about savages in the subway of New York, Washington, San Francisco. Who's the dominant person in the Islamophobia network? John Bolton, possible Secretary of State under Romney, top neocon as part of this campaign. But this is not the part that I really want to get to. Ambassador Stevens, I'm afraid I have to be very blunt. Normally, nothing but good about the dead. But Ambassador Stevens was in Benghazi to negotiate with Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups because his business was to send them to Turkey and then on to Syria. And his last conversation was with the Turkish diplomat about that. So that's why he's there. Last conversation, Turkish diplomat, and he's sitting right in the middle of the terror axis. Benghazi, Tobruk, Derna. What group comes to kill Ambassador Stevens? Well, it's the Kumu group. K-U-M-U, Q-U-M-U, G-U-M-U. Kumu was bin Laden's chauffeur. He was put into Guantanamo Bay concentration camp. He was then let out after 4 years. Now, tell me, pray tell, how do you get out of Guantanamo and let free? You do that by becoming a double agent for the CIA. Guantanamo is a training camp. It's not just a place of incarceration. It's a training base. So Kumu went over there and then was a key guy in the overthrow of Gaddafi, which was what the U.S. wanted. So Kumu's group now comes to kill the U.S. ambassador. So, wow. CIA asset kills U.S. ambassador. How about that? Where's the defense? Well, we're told that there's a 12-person CIA team nearby at an annex. What do? Nothing. CIA does nothing. We now have stories on the Fox News and other websites that the CIA chain of command told them to stand down. Petraeus says today, no, it's not true, but I don't trust Petraeus, never did. So they're told to stand down, and then we have the February 17th Martyrs Brigade, which is another CIA asset. And the way we know that is there was a rivalry to see who would become the leader of the Libyan armed forces between Yunus, they were the people who had stayed in Libya, and a guy called Haftar, who lived out here near Langley. So Haftar was the CIA candidate. The Martyrs Brigade, the February 17th Martyrs Brigade, killed Yunus, allowing the CIA candidate to take over. So on the basis of that, we can say the February 17th Martyrs Brigade is also a CIA asset. So to sum it up, CIA asset kills U.S. ambassador. CIA 12-man team does nothing. They say they were told to stand down. I think they were. And a group of CIA irregulars do nothing to save the life of the ambassador. So Aren't we dealing here with a prima facie case of some group inside the CIA command that wants this to happen, and they want people to die? Who might that be? I say CIA Mormon mafia, FBI Mormon mafia. Now, how do I know such a thing exists? Well, Mormon men, males, like Mitt Romney, like Tag, like all his sons, are sent abroad for 2 years of missionary work. They come back, they have very rare skill in the U.S. Foreign language, foreign experience, foreign exposure, right? Most people here don't have it. Not only that, but they're straight arrows. They don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't womanize. They have very conservative family situations, right? They get the inside track, CIA, FBI. And ever hear of a guy called Brent Scowcroft? For many years, I can remember in the 80s, the 90s, long after Kissinger had left power, the word was that whenever there was a vacancy at the CIA, the State Department, whatever it was, Kissinger always had a candidate. Yeah, except given Kissinger's well-known, somewhat languid lifestyle, who's really doing the work of putting together the post with the candidate? His right-hand man. Who's his right-hand man? General Brent Scowcroft, right? From all these Republican administrations. Now, if you want to see somebody who's a gray eminence of the network, I think Brent Scowcroft might be the guy. He was, after all, somebody who was in a doomsday aircraft flying around on 9/11 and could, by that virtue of that, could have become the government of the United States sometime on 9/11 if Bush and Cheney hadn't made it, right? They could have given it to him, in de facto at least. So Brent Scowcroft has been building this faction for quite a while, and I'm sure there are all sorts of other people in it. Now this allows us, I think, to see Romney in a light which is qualitatively different from Obama. Obama came in as a pretty much controlled puppet of the Trilateral Commission and Wall Street. Romney comes in with the backing of a rather formidable network inside the federal government that wants him to win. And they will then want him to do other things. So I think that's a very big consideration, that you don't want somebody who can call on that kind of a network, especially given the kinds of commitments that they have. Now let's look at Romney and try to see, if we can, some of the signs of the Mormon history, culture, traditions working in him. Well, one is that Romney is secretive. He won't tell you about his tax returns. He won't tell you about his foreign accounts, right? He's got them in Liechtenstein and the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and Germany and except you can't know it. Taxes, can't see those. And then it's not just secrecy, but it's also this other tendency, right? The flip-flop on so many issues, right? The etch-a-sketch, the Romnesia. Well, let's see if there's anything in the history of the Mormon Church, right, this political entity, which allows us to maybe derive the flip-flopping and the secrecy from them. Well, the first thing, of course, is that it is secret. Imagine Romney becomes president and the news reporter comes on and say, President Romney today worshipped at the Mormon temple north of Georgia Avenue, and unfortunately that's all we can tell you because we're not allowed in and he's not allowed to say anything about it. That already gives me the creeps. That you can't know what goes on. But let's now look at the history of Mormonism. The hot issue on the surface is polygamy. I think it's really theocracy and antinomianism. But let's look at polygamy. Polygamy began in the Mormon Church with Joseph Smith in the late 1820s, we think, because he didn't put out a press release when he started with his first celestial wife. He kept it secret. He kept it secret all his life. Joseph Smith never admitted to being a polygamist. And he died in 1844. So for that whole time, Joseph Smith and all the Mormon Church are lying. They're practicing polygamy and they lie about it. Joseph Smith, well, the low estimate is about 35 wives. The middle estimate is about 55 wives. The high estimate is about 85 wives for Joseph Smith. That's polygamy. Many of these are married women, it is thought, so that the evidence of his celestial attentions would not become immediately evident. But from the point of view of these women, that's not just polygamy, that's polyandry. In other words, the woman is forced to have 2 husbands or more. Now, this was...
I mean, if the man can do it, why can't the woman?
Yeah, look, here's the thing with Joseph Smith. And I would invite you to seriously think about this. One of the, I said the main reason Joseph Smith succeeds as a mountebank is because the British help him to recruit. But there is something more. In other words, you're dealing with one of the most gifted demagogues of recent centuries. I mean, I would put him in a class with Count Cagliostro, what I regard as a Venetian agent. One of the guys who helped to start the French Revolution was Count Cagliostro. Maybe you've seen there's an old movie about this where the idea is that he could hypnotize an entire crowd. In other words, a public square with 10,000 people, he could hypnotize them. I think Joseph Smith is in some kind of a category like this. And the way that he does it is by the benefit of multiple personalities. And having had, in my long and sad career, the chance to observe, what can we say, cult leaders at close range, I think that this is the key to Joseph Smith. In other words, you look at him and you say, what? Kolob, polygamy, polytheism? You can't believe that stuff. Well, part of him does. And this is to say part of him does believe it, is to say that he's got multiple personalities and he's able to call on them. And I urge you to look in here. I did bring you some quotes from one of the people cited by Fawn Brodie. Fawn Brodie is the best biography of Joseph Smith so far. And she quotes British psychoanalyst by the name of Phyllis Greenacre talking about the imposter. And one of her points in talking about the imposter is multiple personalities. Now, Joseph Smith was an imposter. That's not just me. That's the state of New York in a guilty verdict on Joseph Smith, that he's an imposter and he's guilty of disorderly conduct. But it's the multiple personalities. In other words, he's got a calculating businessman personality, and then he's got the prophetic personality. And he's got some ironic inner distance on himself. In other words, he says, you read these things, some good quotes in here. He says, he sells the people a whole bill of goods, and then he turns to somebody and he says, and of course you've got to know that I'm honest because I'm a prophet, am I not?
Is that not merely narcissistic personality?
Yeah, it's all that. It's narcissism, but
multiple personalities?
it's so extreme that you can't, and here's what it leads to. Multiple personalities, multiple wives, and multiple gods. And I would say this is a world of schizophrenia. In other words, I think schizophrenia is built in to this so-called religion. And multiple planets. And when he says multiple planets, what he really means is parallel universes. Because he's got parallel universes, each one being ruled over by a god.
I was going to ask you, since we're talking about multiple personalities, and I know that one of the ways that these personalities are created is through sexual abuse of young children. Do you believe that Joseph Smith was sexually abused as a young child? Because that is something, if you read about these multiple personalities, how that happens, and if you think about Mormonism and the young brides that they take, and it's the older man with the child bride, do you think this might have happened to him?
Well, the thing about Joseph Smith, that's a very interesting, I hadn't quite thought about it in those terms, that in his family he had older brothers, and one of them beat him up all the time and persecuted him like mad. And when you look at some of the stories, which I can't really go into in detail, but you look at the Book of Mormon, there's a whole lot of stuff about brother killing brother. And this seems to be one of the big things going on for Joseph Smith. The other thing about it is, Joseph Smith's mother is an Antinomian. And this is this area, it's called the burned over area, Western New York. And this is twice burned. Because these people, the people that he's starting with to recruit, they were burned in the Great Awakening of the 1740s by Jonathan Edwards, right? Sinners in the hands of the angry God, which extreme Calvinism, depravity, predestination. So they're burned once, and then they're burned again by the Great Revival of the 1820s. So they are biscuit. They're the biscuit, the twice cooked area, and that's where he comes up with these people. So let's just talk a little bit about this, right? My starting point. Oh, wait a minute! I got to finish on polygamy. So the Mormons from 1830 to 1852 practice polygamy and deny it indignantly. What? How dare you? We'd never do that. That's depraved. Blah, blah, blah. And Joseph Smith dies lying, and there are even scenes where he threatens people. He says, if you don't sign a statement saying that I'm not a polygamist, I'm going to kill you. I'll make catfish bait out of you, was one of his favorite expressions. Then from 1852 to 1890, polygamy is proclaimed and practiced and come to Salt Lake City. By now they're in Salt Lake City. Joseph Smith has been killed. Brigham Young leads them to Salt Lake City. And Brigham is different. See, Joseph Smith is on record saying, every time I see a pretty woman, I pray for grace, because I'm tempted. Well, he indulged in his temptations. Brigham Young is more about power. And his basic calculation is, if I can get these men into polygamous marriages, I can keep them here. Right? There's no way, because they can't leave. There's no place in North America where you could be polygamous. So once you're polygamous and you've got this family, you got to stay here with me, because nobody else will ever take you. So that goes on from 1852 to 1890. Now there are attempts, which I go through, I won't go through all the details, the Morrill Act, the Poland Act, Supreme Court decisions, on and on. By 1890, it's clear to the Mormons they will never get into the Union if they stay polygamous, and they will be expropriated. It's like RICO. There's a law that says if you're a society for the promotion of polygamy, you will be expropriated. So at that point, the prophet has a revelation, and a couple of weeks before they're going to get all their property seized, he said, God told me that we should obey the law of the land. And he does. So from 1852 to 1890, it's underground, but they're still having polygamous marriages. I would say the big thing is, from 1830 to 1852, polygamy is for the Mormon elite. Joseph Smith, and let me mention already, Parley P. Pratt. Parley P. Pratt is the ancestor of Romney. And this is like Christ and St. Paul or something like this, right? Parley Pratt is the guy who recruited more Mormons than anybody else during this time. So they're in command at that time. Then from 1852 to 1890, they practice it and proclaim it, and indeed they attract a lot of people. There are a lot of farmers who go to South Utah. They get 5 or 6 wives. Those become the field hands. The husband is the overseer, and you have essentially slavery on the southern model, but now with women in the Great Basin. Then from 1890 on, it goes back to being not for the elite, not for the masses, but for the elite. The last first president of the Mormon Church who was polygamous died in 1945. And then the question had already came up, does Romney have multiple wives? I believe he certainly does, in the sense of women who are sealed to him for the celestial harem. Because that's, the doctrine has changed, saying, on earth, obey the law of the land, but when you get your planet, you got to have your harem, so you got to get sealed. And that means you've got to get these women to pledge themselves to you, right? And that means not to their husbands. Their poor husband is going to be castrated and a servant in the celestial realm. And this is, of course, this is conducted with a great deal of duplicity. So you can see prevarication, lying, deception, etch-a-sketch, and it's always the absolute truth at any point in the process. Whatever they're saying today is God's absolute truth. Then, of course, there's the the sort of dissident Mormon area, like Warren Jeffs. What does this mean? Southern Utah, where the Romney family lived, and northern Arizona is this area where polygamy is dominant today, right? Colorado City, Arizona. Mayor is a polygamist. Chief of police a polygamist. City council, all polygamists. Fire chief, right? Whatever it is. The entire establishment, right? Judges, right? There's nothing you can do. And Orrin Hatch, we just decided Orrin Hatch might be a candidate for the Supreme Court under Romney, and I'm not kidding. Right? He's a saint. Huh? Well, yeah, maybe they'll find. How about Senator Mike Lee, a younger version of the same monstrosity, right? Mike Lee says that child labor laws are unconstitutional, says Mike Lee. But they might, Hatch at any rate is on record saying, hey, some of my best friends are polygamists, because they want the votes. So Warren Jeffs is, of course, in the penitentiary, but an upper scale Warren Jeffs goes to the White House. Now, I won't go through the entire narrative. Let's just look at some of the prophecies that might be binding Mitt Romney today. Okay, some of the things which are not just episodes of Mormon history, but treason, things like this. By the way, treason. Joseph Smith was indicted for treason at least once. Joseph Smith tried to take over. Well, he had taken over the part of the Illinois state militia, and he tried to use that for his own purposes. So that was considered treason. Brigham Young was indicted for treason at least 3 times that I know of. Once in 1858, once in at earlier times. So this is not such a great tradition. Now, let's look at Joseph Smith's prophecies. In 1832, during the nullification conflict, Joseph Smith comes out saying, there's going to be a huge civil war. South Carolina will start the Civil War, and the British will intervene on the side of the South. Now, what you can see from this is in 1832, he's extremely well informed. How can he know all this? Who knows this in 1832? Well, I would say certain people in London who are planning to make it happen. That would be my guess. But now here's the one that really ought to give us pause. The White Horse Prophecy of 1843 to 1844. Mitt Romney, his entire life, has been groomed, and we have all kinds of people talking about this, right? That he was considered to be the great white horse hope for Mormonism, because he was the son of the leading Mormon politician of the United States. So here's the way it goes. Joseph Smith says, and this is key wording, someday soon the Constitution will hang by a thread. When you hear that, watch out. It's a coup coming, a putsch. The Constitution will hang by a thread. At that point, the White Horse will intervene. The White Horse is the Mormon power of the Intermountain West. The White Horse will ally with the Red Horse, the British Empire. There will be an intervention, a Black Horse, a slave rebellion, on the side of the White Horse and the Red Horse. The United States will be gone. The Mormons will seize control of North America. They will absorb the Red Horse, the British, so we'll have an Anglo empire worldwide. And then we will have to deal with what he calls the heathen Chinese. They have to be pushed aside. And the ultimate apocalyptic battle will be between the White Horse, having absorbed the Red Horse and others, the White Horse against Russia. That's the world according to Joseph Smith. Now, you heard even Obama noted this in one of the debates, right? We have earlier in the campaign, Romney saying that Russia is the main geopolitical foe of the United States. And a lot of people wondered, what the hell is that? I mean, maybe, believing it is one thing, but saying this in an election campaign is absolute insanity. But he did it. And I'm suggesting that maybe this White Horse prophecy is not so far from what we're dealing with. And again, do I really know? I don't know, but I don't want to find out. And I urge you not to want to find out. I don't want to test this. I don't want to test this on my own flesh. This is not the way that such things should be done. So, and again, what's the relation of Mitt Romney? Well, we know that when he was at Brigham Young University with his lily white, class, there's a club called the Cougars. Cougars out there means something totally different. A cougar out there is the white, rich, up and coming, it's like Skull and Bones or something like this, right? At Brigham Young University, and they all say, Mitt, you have to carry out the White Horse prophecy. George Romney is your father. He's the top elected official. Now let's also add a couple of other oaths. We've mentioned maybe one or two. The oath of obedience. The oath of obedience says every Mormon has got to swear, I take orders from the prophet, from the first president out there, Temple Square, Salt Lake City. When Utah finally became a state, they elected, or they chose, since it was still chosen, Senator Reed Smoot. Smoot. And yes, this is Hawley Smoot. This was an extreme reactionary, pro-Hitler in the 1930s, like many Mormons. Reed Smoot was not seated by the Senate because they said, wait a minute, how can you take the oath to the Constitution when you've already taken the oath of obedience to the Mormon Church? And there were long hearings, some of which I've read, right, where they bring in people and talk to them about it. So, what's the story with the oath of obedience by Romney? Because this he has taken himself, guaranteed. He took the oath of obedience. Now, I have some idea what goes on in Roman Catholicism. Maybe people here are Catholics. I don't think Catholics have to swear any oath to the Pope. A Jesuit does, but I don't think an average Catholic has to do that at all. That's my understanding. Anyway, and you can imagine some other church where you've got to take this binding oath. And then the oath of vengeance. I mentioned it before. Until the late 1920s, every time you went to the temple, I swear to avenge on the United States and the American people the deaths of the prophets Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith. And I'm going to teach that to four generations. And that extends, depending on how you count, either to tags, kids, or even beyond. Now, the thing that I bring to all this is already, I think, quite scary. But now, again, how did it happen? The British. One of the stories I tell in here, in Paris in the late 1980s, I was very privileged to get to know a distinguished Orientalist, Professor Ali Mazaheri of Iran. He was one of the top Iranian scholars working in Western Europe, starting in the 1930s already. And he said, Tarpley, you've got to study the three miracles of the Victorian age. And he had three, and he said, one is Joseph Smith and the Mormons, the other is Karl Marx and Marxism, and the third is the Bab and the religion called Baha'i, which is a rebellion inside Islam. And the idea of this was that all of these are miracles that come at the height of the power of the British Empire. The British Empire peaks worldwide between 1850 approximately and 1870. That is when the British are very close to total world domination. The Crimean War, the American Civil War are all features of the British trying to get the extra mile so that there'd be no resistance to them anywhere in the world.
So you're saying that the British had something to
Yeah, I'm going to tell you how.
with Baha'u'llah and the Baha'i faith?
Yeah, sure. And now this is not the thing that I studied. I'm simply reporting what Mazaheri, who did go in. I can tell you a couple of others.
And he's a Muslim.
I don't know what he was. I think he became a Roman Catholic by that time, but I'm not sure. Anyway, the ones that I would tell you, I would add two or three more. The one that I would add most is the Celestial Kingdom of the Taiping. Anybody ever hear of that one?
Oh, yeah.
It is the biggest military engagement of the 19th century. It is the biggest number of deaths caused by war anywhere in the world. And it starts with a guy called Hong, who says, I am the younger brother of Jesus Christ. And from this we get an army in southeast China. Remember, the British are attacking from the outside with opium and the Opium Wars. And as a result of this conflagration, the death toll is usually put between 20 and 30 million people killed by burning crops, burning cities, mass exterminations. And where did this all start from?